Get this, we just did a deal with the Philippines that's never been done in the history of the world. It's an AI manufacturing zone, over 4,000 acres. It's basically a big American colony inside a former American colony. And it's designed to China-proof our supply chain. Manila gave it to us for 99 years. And they even threw in diplomatic immunity, so no parking tickets.
What if I told you that one of the most important geopolitical shifts happening right now isn't being talked about the way most people think it should be? Not in a way that's loud, not in a way that's emotional or that trends online for a day and disappears, but in a quiet, calculated long-term way that involves military positioning, economic survival, and global power balancing between the United States and China. And somehow, in the middle of all that, the Philippines is suddenly right there at the center of conversation. Now, I want to be very careful with how we walk through this because this is one of those topics where people tend to jump straight into extremes. Some people hear US bases and immediately think it's protection and safety. Others hear it and think occupation and danger. But the reality, as usual, it sits somewhere more complicated in the middle. And what triggered a lot of recent attention again was a commentary from Jesse Waters where he used the phrase China proofing. And I want to pause there because that phrase sounds dramatic if you don't understand the context. People hear it and think there's some kind of hidden revelation or secret exposure happening. But that's not what it means. China proofing is not about exposing China, it's about strategy. It's a long term positioning. It's about preparing systems so that if geopolitical tensions escalate, a country is not completely dependent or vulnerable. In simple terms, it means this: if the global system shifts, are you ready? And that question, believe it or not, is now being asked by major powers in relation to supply chains, military access, and strategic geography across Asia. Now, before we even get into the Philippines specifically, we need to understand the broader backdrop. For decades, the global system has been built around one core reality: the United States as the dominant superpower and China as a rising manufacturing and economic giant. These two systems are deeply interconnected. China produces a massive portion of global goods, while the United States and its allies consume and distribute a large portion of global trade. But that interdependence has also created vulnerability. And over time, both sides have become increasingly aware of that vulnerability. So, what happens when dependence becomes a risk? Countries start adjusting. They start moving production, they start building alliances, they start positioning military assets in areas that allow them to respond faster, operate more efficiently, and reduce uncertainty. And this is where Southeast Asia becomes extremely important. Because if you look at the map, the Philippines sit in one of the most strategically sensitive maritime regions in the world. It is surrounded by major shipping lanes, it is close to Taiwan, and it sits near contested waters in the South China Sea. Now, let's talk history for a second, because none of this makes sense without it. The Philippines and the United States have a long and complicated relationship. There was a time when the United States had large military bases there, but in 1991, those bases were removed after political decisions in the Philippines prioritized sovereignty and independence. That decision didn't end the relationship, it changed it. Years later, in 2014, both countries signed what is known as the Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement, often referred to as EDCA. And this agreement is important because it does something very specific. It allows the United States access to certain Philippine military bases, but it does not give ownership. The land remains Filipino, the access is rotational, but not permanent occupation. So, in simple terms, it is cooperation without transfer of sovereignty. But then, something changed again in recent years. Under President Ferdinand Marcos Jr., the agreement was expanded. Additional sites were approved, and suddenly, what was once a limited arrangement became a much wider strategic network across the country. Now, here's what it becomes important to understand geography, because geography is really what drives all of this. In northern Luzon, near areas like Cagayan and Isabela, you have locations that sit very close to Taiwan, and that region becomes important in any scenario involving cross-strait tensions. In the west, in Palawan, you are facing the South China Sea, one of the most disputed maritime regions in the world. In the center of the country, you have logistics and mobility hubs that allow movement between islands. So, when you connect all of these points together, what you see is not a random set of locations. You see a network designed around response time, access, and positioning. Now, I want to pause here and say something very important because this is where most public conversation tend to oversimplify things. This is not automatically good or bad. It is strategic. And strategy always has trade-offs. Because on one hand, countries like the Philippines gain access to military support, investment, infrastructure development, and stronger defense alignment with the United States, okay? While, on the other hand, its increased strategic importance also means increased exposure. If tensions escalate between major powers, locations that are strategically valuable can also become strategically sensitive. And this is where public opinion starts to split. Some people look at this and say, this is exactly what the Philippines needs: strong alliances, stronger defense capabilities, and economic development tied to global partnership. They see it as stability in an unstable region, while others look at it and say, this increases risk. It pulls the Philippines closer to major power competition. It raises questions about sovereignty, neutrality, and long term independence in foreign policy decision making. And both perspectives are rooted in real concerns. Because the truth is, once a country becomes strategically significant, it becomes harder to remain completely neutral in global power dynamics. Now, let's bring in the economic layer, because this is where people often underestimate the situation. The region surrounding the Philippines is not just militarily important, it is economically critical. A massive portion of global shipping passes through nearby waters. Energy supplies move through these routes. And perhaps most importantly, nearby Taiwan is one of the most important semiconductor producers in the world. Those semiconductors are inside almost every modern device you can think of: phones, computers, cars, military systems, medical equipment. If that supply chain is disrupted, the effects are not local, they are global. Prices rise, production slows, and markets react. So when global powers position themselves around this region, they are not just thinking about war, they are thinking about stability, supply chains, and economic continuity. The idea is simple. If you are prepared, conflict is less likely. But the counter argument is also simple. Preparation itself can increase tension. And that tension is what defines this entire situation. So when people ask, is this good or bad for the Philippines? The honest answer is not simple. It brings opportunity, it brings investment, it brings security partnerships, but it also increases strategic importance in a region where global competition is rising. For the average person in the Philippines, this is not just about maps and agreements and strategy documents, okay? It is about what kind of future the country is building into. It is about jobs, the safety, the development, and long-term national direction. And that is why this conversation matters. Because whether people realize it or not, decisions made today shape decades ahead. And when you zoom out far enough, what you see is not just the Philippines. You see a world slowly reorganizing itself around new power structures, new alliances, and new uncertainties. And that is where the real question begins. Not whether this is happening, but how it is going to be handled moving forward. Because that will actually define everything that comes after. That is the real end goal. Not escalation, not dependency, and absolutely not conflict. But a Philippines that is ready, resilient, and ultimately not defined by global tension, but by its own growth and stability moving forward. And that is where I'll leave this conversation for now. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you in my next one. Goodbye.